Copy this. Big Thinking Local Climate Action.
London's Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, Shirley Rodriguez, has been very involved in developing the city's environment strategy to achieve a zero-carbon, greener London. She acknowledges that the Mayor cannot achieve these objectives alone, and that projects like Energy Garden not only create new green spaces, but also enable Londoners to get involved in renewable energy programs that benefit their local area. So let's find out what's really happening across the London overground rail network at the stations where transport, green space, locally produced renewable energy, and local communities meet and cross over. I'm Rick Casali.
And I'm Amanda Carpenter, and we are your hosts for Copy This, a new podcast from Carbon Copy about big thinking, local climate action. Our guests today are Agamemnon Otero, who is the CEO and founder of Energy Garden, and Charlotte Whitfield, who's the Customer Experience Director of Arriva Rail London, which operates the London Overground network on behalf of Transport for London. Agamemnon and Charlotte, welcome. Really nice to have you at the programme today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I guess when people think about London Transport and the Overground network, they probably don't think gardens. They probably think dusty railway stations, possibly litter, standing, waiting for their train. It's not necessarily a place you'd go for kind of joy and inspiration, but under your guidance and care, the two of you, you've transformed that, haven't you, that image, and you've created spaces that are welcoming, green and beneficial for the communities. Agamemnon, tell us about Energy Garden. What is it? Paint a picture for our listeners.
Well, right off the bat, I just want to say that way beyond Charlotte and myself, there are thousands of people that every day come together. And that's literally what Energy Garden is. It's a cooperative, a community benefit society. And that's so that it benefits more than just its members. It benefits the greater community. And our community is hundreds of thousands of people that frequent the stations every day. And we have bat huts and bird nests and beehives and gardens and biodiversity sanctuaries on the platforms of the transport of London. And so what we're doing is basically inviting people to become a part of what has been an urban commons, which we have not necessarily been able to integrate the local communities into. And we then generate a revenue from renewable energy. So transport is the biggest emitter of carbon emissions in the UK. And what we're trying to do is have a conversation with the community of customers and passengers that go the 2.4 billion passenger journeys a year on the London Overground and Underground. We want to give that conversation a real rich nature, which is to allow them to see one another, talk about these issues that are facing us, but also have a wonderful time and enhance the world we live in.
Ag, if you go back to the very first station, where did the inspiration come from in the first place? And then how did you go about trying to encourage Arriva, which are obviously the people I presumably own the infrastructure and the platforms, to share your vision and the imagination?
I have been to the promised land. I grew up on self-sustaining farms and communities in America. And my mom was a teacher. My grandfather was a policeman. And they really believed in like workers' rights and unions and helped build Co-op City in New York. And when I came to London about 22 years ago, what I found was young people who were disenfranchised, communities who were on the wrong side of the tracks. Quite literally, there was groups that were sort of cordoned off by larger infrastructure, big roads like the Westway, or infrastructure like the rail that sort of divided a community. And then those on one side had more access to supermarkets and fresh vegetables and cheaper energy to those people on the other side. And there was sort of poverty lines. And so over the last 15 years, I've worked with communities, built 16 different cooperatives. And I want to start by saying, I've failed probably 15 times. Each one of those organizations is still running, but the point was that each time that we redid it, we made it stronger. And the idea was to address the issues of heat or eat dilemma. So people who in fuel poverty or in food poverty. And it started because there was really issues where I lived in Brixton, on the Stockwell Road. There was the 322 bus line, and I took that and I worked with the local community and got people planting the bus station. We found that there was high levels of cadmium from the road paint, and there was high levels of metals in the soil. So we stopped and we began working with the overground. In 2012, on July 8th, I remember I went and I just ripped up the black plastic, which a defunct company we don't like to talk about anymore, named Carillion, was the network contractor for the rail for the then organization called Laurel, which was London Overground Rail Operations Limited. And I just pulled it up as like a passenger, just minding my own business, and started planting things. And I started talking to the station managers. At that time, it was Dave Cranston and Heather, and they were amazing. And they were local people. And Dave was a West Indian. He said, I've gone back to school and studying herbs and for healing. Let's plant herbs and healing. And the Laurel went, Carillion went, and Arriva came. And there are about 4 or 5 different rail operators and concession holders, and the DFT, then there's Network Rail, then there's the concession, then there's London Overground and London Underground that are managed by TfL, and then there's concessions like Arriva. And we began working with them, and it's been a beautiful process to learn all the ways. And there's been lots of pitfalls and mistakes and relearning. But I want to say that it always starts with trying, failing, and then remaking.
You were a guerrilla gardener, really, weren't you, in those early days? You went out there and you ripped up the plastic there and you planted things. But what I'm taking from that story, and I'm sure others are, is that you just need a spark, don't you? You need an individual, or you need a champion who sees what you want to do and makes it happen. In your case, it was those 2 early station managers. But that alone is not enough. So you do need the support of the big players like Arriva Rail London, like Charlotte's team. Charlotte, how did you get into this? I mean, I'm sure Agamemnon could probably persuade anybody to do anything, but how did he capture your imagination and encourage you to support the Energy Gardens project?
Well, I think as part of Arriva and also as part of our concession with TfL, we feel really passionately about the communities that we serve at London Overground. We orbit the outskirts of London. We go through some really challenging areas, some really affluent areas. It's a real mix of people who utilise our services, and actually being part of those local communities is really important to us. And London Overground has, without question, changed parts of London where it started to serve, like the East London line, for example. So it's really important to us that we connect with our local communities and the customers that utilise those stations. And on top of that, sustainability for us becomes ever more increasingly important as time goes on. And we know that really matters not only to us, but also to our customers. And we want to be seen, not to be left behind in terms of that. So I think, for me, there's 2 elements. It's about improving the stations for the people who use them, providing them a place that feels safe and secure. If we know if there's flowers there, if it looks nice, people are going to be less likely to graffiti it, less likely to litter, less likely for antisocial behaviour to take place. So that's really important. But we also, we want to give something back to our communities in terms of that improvement to the environment as well. So for us, it's ticking a lot of boxes, and it's a really positive thing for us to be able to do as well, for our staff as well.
And Charlotte, how did the staff members feel about it? Because on the one hand, I could imagine they feel it's a bit of a burden. There's like a garden, and there's mess, and there's soil, and there's people working on the platform, health and safety. So there could be a headache on the one hand. Are staff generally getting behind this, or do they see it as just extra work?
I think that's why we've got to be really careful when we pick the stations and the locations. So it's not just about where would a garden work physically, it's also about, have we got the right team in place at that location, staff who are engaged and who want to buy into it. I was just thinking earlier, I wasn't here in 2012 when this began, but a recent example for me is at Brockley Station. I've seen one of our team members there who is in the garden every day. He's coming in on his days off. He's putting his own money in because he's so desperate to make it look better. And it's because of what he's getting back from the customers. They're coming to him and they're saying, "Oh, this really made a difference to my day." And so I think a bit of a learning or a bit of advice would be, make sure you pick the right places, because if you don't pick the right places with the right people, then it may not necessarily be a success.
how do the gardens work? Because I mean, obviously you can't rely solely on the staff, because even, your great station manager is coming in on his days off. That, you presumably need network of volunteers or other community members. How does it actually work to get the work done? And how do you reach out to those people?
So I think the most important thing to clarify is that Energy Garden is a not-for-profit. It's a community benefit society, and we've raised over £2.5 million to deliver the financial, technical, legal, human resources, security, risk stuff, all the things that Arriva need, whether it's a glint and glare assessment, health and safety risk assessments, structural impact assessments on the different hills or the walls. All that's been paid for through grant funding from the National Lottery, from Friends Provident Foundation, from charitable trusts across the UK, and we've been able to deliver that through three ways. The first one is that funding then supports full-time staff, a technical officer, a legal officer, engagement officers, a biodiversity lead, all those elements. Then we have the engagement officers, which work with teams of people. We have over 150 people every day working on multiple gardens who are like volunteers. Maybe they're 2 hours or 4 hours. There are touch points all along the way, but the work is delivered by the engaged individuals that live there. It's, if anything, we've come into an interesting time. When COVID hit, there was a great deal of older people who had more time to spend at the gardens, and they dispersed and spent a lot more time at home, more sheltered from the pandemic, whereas there was a bunch of younger people who were furloughed in their early 20s, 30s, and they came out in the droves. We had more people during the pandemic because whether it was classified as effectively farming and gardening was allowable, and also we work with vulnerable young people, and so we could have little pods of and groups working the whole time through COVID. So people were coming out feeling engaged and involved, wearing masks, following all health and safety, but being able to be there. So over the last whatever that is, 10 years, we've had about 10,000 square meters of space on the London Overground and Underground cultivated through the hands of thousands of people who live in their local area. And it's a 16-stage process. And I said, I've been working to address food poverty and fuel poverty. First, it was the edible bus stop, and then there was Brixton Energy, Hackney Energy, Vox Energy, Repowering. These were all organizations that built a revenue stream to deliver community engagement through renewable energy. And then Energy Garden has really been, how do you widen that out to a wider sustainability narrative around food growing? And the 16-stage process really asks people to co-produce what is in front of them. We want to take these spaces, which we assume are not for us. You might not have a garden in your house, but we assume when you see these green spaces going past you when you're on the train, it's not for you. But then we ask them to co-create a design of what they'd like to see. And then we bring it to Arriva, we bring it to Transport for London, we bring it to the Department for Transport and say, look, how can we rethink this? How can we as a community, as the people who experience this urban commons, integrate into that? And how do we co-produce that? What do we plant? What can we do? And that process of integrating both the ideas from local people, the staff members, into that, presenting it to Arriva, presenting it to Network Rail, presenting it to the Department for Transport, and then circling back and saying, let's then build it like an Amish barn raise. Let's come together and everybody will build it off site, make it all in a safe way using the fire retardant materials and all the elements that would be needed in this circumstance. And then we, like an IKEA frame, we assemble on site with a bunch of people all together who've been there from the outset of selecting the spaces, talking it through, bringing ideas, iteratively going back and forth with the network provider, Arriva, to say what they can and cannot do, and then coming together in a collaborative celebration to then plant it and then go on to harvest it and do that regular, the 4 seasons, bring the planting, the growing, the harvesting, and then the planning for the next year, that cycle annually to the people. And it's a co-collaborative, co-production that is enabled.
I think that co-creation is so powerful, not only in terms of ownership and bringing more and more people on board, but also I imagine that the outcome is really a reflection of the different communities themselves and also the different staff members at the different stations. So, in what way does that translate? Do people end up choosing different things to plant, different designs? Like, how do you see some of the characters of the different communities and the stations reflected in the co-creation, in what the output looks like?
Every garden is different, and that's a beautiful thing. Like, the process is the same, so having an iterative, collaborative process allows for each community to do that. So, for instance, Charlotte will have some examples. I have some examples. I was just sharing with her that at Bronsbury Park, when we first started in 2012, there was Heather and Dave, and we were planting things, and Dave was really keen on edible herbs, and Heather really wanted vegetables. So we were planting those things. But then there was a whole bunch of people that were in the local yoga center, and there was another school that was involved, and they were coming in, and it sort of split off. So it was 5 different community groups that were then rallying around certain ideas. So we had to make a tea, like a indigenous tea area. We had to have a bee area. We had to have a food growing area. Then somebody's like, oh, we want renewable energy. So we have a solar powered water pumps. I mean, you try to come up with these solutions, and by the very nature of collaboration, it is very rare that you repeat the same garden again. It becomes unique to that space, but the process is clear, and it can be replicated. And that's one of the greatest things that we have is a clear process which can be utilized in any different place. I mean, Charlotte, you might have examples as well, so I've hand over to you.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the thing that starts as the garden, and then watching it grow into more and more as the local community who maybe weren't involved at the start to get involved as well. So we've seen kind of gardens at certain locations where they've started quite small, and now they're like taking up almost whole platforms. And you get so many people stopping at, on a Oak Park. I know they've got these flowers that just don't seem to die, that even out of season they just seem to survive. I don't know if it's a microclimate there, but you get people coming in and asking for cuttings, and then it starts to engage the staff, and the benefits just sort of keep rolling, really, which is really lovely to see.
You're listening to Copy This, a podcast about working together on big thinking local climate action.
Can I ask you, I've got a couple of questions. One is I want to talk to you about the energy, but I'm going to come back to that. You talked there, Aga, about a replicable model and the kind of, Amish barn and the kit and things. Can I just ask you a really practical question? So we're talking about things like raised beds that you would perhaps build a wooden but raised bed, bring it on site, fill it with earth, or are we talking about garden walls, vertical growing? I mean, I haven't had the chance to visit one of the stations. So what does it actually physically look like?
So if you close your eyes and imagine, first off, the train's going by and the voice saying, next stop. Da, 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 da. And then when the voice stops, you'll hear birds singing, you'll hear bees, and you'll smell different things like flowers, or at this time of year, you might smell some mint or thyme, because there are trellises, there are, like you say, wooden planters, but there are also sections which had dirt to begin with that were already there. Arriva has been managing and looking after those spaces. TfL infrastructure built those with Network Rail 50, 60, 100 years ago, right? Which had been either covered in black plastic, like that example that I gave earlier, or had just was rubbish. We found colostomy bags, syringes, guns, knives, you name it, we found it. Bullets, shovels, half cars, engines, and you've taken those things out, replenished the soil, and planted things there. So you have, vertical walls of green down to little raised beds that are germinating sweet peas to, more hardy, robust. I mean, Alexandra was down in the example that one of the station as delivery managers for Charlotte is down in the last station that she previously mentioned. And she was very keen that we'd have hardier plants. So of course, that's what that group wanted. They wanted long-term invigorated plantings that would go on. And so it's that type of thing. So a very fully robust. Some stations have beehives, others have bat huts, some have swift nets, like right outside. The oldest community gardening charity in the UK is Kew Gardens Trust, which is outside Kew Gardens, and they're like the gardening group. And we've been working with Energy Gardens since 2013. And so they were really interested in having local birds. So there's swift nests. There's even areas that are specifically for different types of fauna and flora that are there. So different types of birds. They were trying to create that biodiversity sanctuaries from the outset. They never wanted to have vegetables. So there's this clear narratives for each station. But it changes through the cycles of people, because some people, what is it like? They say that London population has 1/3 of its population changing every 3 years or so. So there's real movements of people, and therefore there's real shifts in ideas. And rewilding was not an idea 10, 11 years ago. And now it's on the tip of everyone's tongue. So that is really shifting the direction. Places like Finchley Central, which when we first started, there was a really wonderful group of churches and synagogues and mosques that wanted to come together and asked me if I would help them to put a garden together. And then the people that came forward to help be a part of that garden were really keen on long-term, like bushes and shrubs, the burning bush. But the people that then came once the garden was up and running were the local schools. And there's 7 different primary schools and things that pop in and do that. And so they've got a whole growing program now where we are planting new things. It's all edibles. So, yes, it's a process. Yes, it's iterative. Yes, you come up with a solution, but that solution then keeps morphing, and you have to have that process in place too to help facilitate that.
And you're called Energy Garden, so there must be an energy element to this. And you very briefly talked about solar running water pumps, but are you creating energy that you're using for anything else, or is all of the energy that's created by I'm assuming it's solar, not wind, at a station used just for that station?
Well, I would say that it's energy in its 2 forms: community energy and renewable owned community energy. And yes, we have the first solar cooperative on the rail in the UK, and it's on train. We put it onto train depots. So there was one in Streatham. There's a Streatham train station which has hundreds of solar panels on the top of it, and that not only powers all the needs of the train operator out of that large depot, which runs 24/7, but it then 60% of that can then go onto the grid. And the clothing company Patagonia buys all their energy from us, and they run all of their stores in the UK from Energy Garden energy. So that then generates the revenue, because then we can keep going. Because the process of having full-time staff to help deliver these engagements, you can imagine working with 140 community groups. You have to have full-time engagement staff going back and forth every day. There's actually 2 officers out right now at 2 different gardening sessions, which have 10 people each. So it's a full-time endeavor. And so we need to have a revenue, and anyone can invest in that. So it's a renewable energy cooperative, and everybody has 1 vote, 1 shareholding. We buy energy, install that solar, and then put it back into the rail. And any excess we then sell off to interested parties who want to see what we do happen further. So they can pay so Patagonia, for instance, is paying them the social premium. We have other B Corps who have been also signed up to that to buy our energy as well. So
I love the intersection between energy and urban green space. I think there's a lot of magic happens where these things cross over. Agamemnon, how do you actually go about not only identifying the sites, but possibly getting the permission, which could be quite hard, to install a new solar panel on a depot or piece of infrastructure in order to deliver the renewable energy part to Energy Garden?
So I can answer that question because, as I said earlier, the initial cooperatives were around energy and directly addressing fuel poverty. Remember, it was the heat or eat dilemma. And so for the first 12 years of my time developing these programs, I was trying to come up with a solution. So I've built Community Energy England and the first community energy projects on social housing in the UK, in Brixton, in Hackney, and was all really developing the UK national strategy and then the first community energy strategy for all of Europe. It was a process which I have been given an MBE for. It's something that's taken a great deal of time to do, and the skill set is negotiating lease agreements, power purchase agreements. Like, how do you get the first solar cooperative on the rail? Because you're willing to bang your head against a wall for a long time. We have a quad-party lease agreement, quad-party power purchase agreement. So all these parties came together and spending about £100,000 on negotiating leases and power purchase agreements and all these deals to get there to that place to build templates. So it's a long, arduous process to get there. But now I can say to you, we talk directly to the transport owners, and so there are many different concession holders which have a longer period who run larger infrastructure. So they might have 10, 20, 30 year infrastructure leases to the network rail that might have 100 years, who basically respond to the Department for Transport. So we work with all those different bodies to then both find those assets and then deliver the sites. And turning on a switch and saying, this power comes from Energy Garden took loads of time and energy. But just to keep it really simple, it means negotiating the best site, looking at where's the best solar incidence, where is the most constructive place to put it, where's the highest usage on site where we will be used. And then how do you agree to those elements? How do for the time period? And then you have to agree how much one would pay for that energy, how much it will cost us to do it, and then tie that all up in a lovely package, and then agree and deliver it to the wider community and say, hey, everybody, do you think this is a great idea? Let's invest to bring the capital to this, and we will return a 5% return to you. And none of that profit will go to anyone's pockets other than to deliver more community gardening projects, more paid accredited youth training programs, more schools programs, more biodiversity sanctuaries on the London Overground.
Charlotte, I can see that there's a huge benefit to the individual communities around those stations, and stations clearly are a hub, aren't they, very often for communities. What's the kind of wider benefit for you as a company, for Arriva? And is it something you think could be replicated for other stations that you might manage or for other rail companies? I mean, what's the kind of upside?
I think for us the primary objective really is around the communities and the customers that we serve. But I suppose, wider than that, we know that the sustainability agenda is growing massively. We know that particularly when it comes to the Department for Transport and TfL, when they're giving out these contracts, that these things are becoming more and more important. So I think that it serves us benefit in terms of attracting people to our network because, they think our station environments are pleasant and feel safe and secure, but also in terms of, us wanting to win that next contract with TfL, we can, hand on heart say that this is a partnership that we truly believe in, and this is what it's giving back to not only the customers and the communities, but also the environment as well.
Do you think this is something that other stations could copy on other networks, or does it just have to be in an urban area like London?
No, I think it is something that could be copied. I think, and Agamemnon talked a little bit about it there. We do now have a quite well-established process, but that has taken a little bit of time to get there. So some of the things that we've had to think about along the way are, how do people work safely on our platforms? How do we give them that access? The health and safety around the railway network is incredibly important to us. There was other things around access to water. So you don't want to be setting up a garden so far away from water that nobody can, have the time or the energy to transport water across a platform, for example. So there's been a lot of sort of things that we've had to work through, but we've now got a really, really good process in place. We make sure that when we are talking about new projects, we think through all of these things so that we can make sure that any gardens that we set up are a real success. So I guess I would say, to other train operators, I would absolutely go for it. The benefits are enormous. There are sort of teething issues you will need to think about, but the more time you put into thinking about those from the start, then the better.
I imagine that you carry out regular customer satisfaction surveys and various scoring. Do you see a really clear correlation between the stations that have energy gardens and your customer satisfaction ratings?
Yeah, absolutely. You can see direct links from not only those surveys, you can see it from the staff surveys as well. So the staff are more engaged at those locations too. We really are absolutely delighted when we receive customer commendations. I think sort of members of the public will be often quick to let us know when something's gone wrong with the journey, but not so often to tell us when something's gone right. And actually, one of the main sources of commendations that we receive is in relation to our community gardens. And, you read some of them and it really does talk about, brightening somebody's day, making a real difference to somebody, in an environment like Agamemnon said earlier, you might not expect to find. So for us, it's really important in terms of customer satisfaction, and you absolutely can see the link.
And what are your ambitions for the future for Energy Garden? I mean, have you got, dare I say, growth plans? I mean, are you planning to grow the network? Do you want to double the number of stations? What's realistic and feasible for you?
Yeah, I mean, if we just carry on, and let's say we've got a hedge fund and a seed fund. No, the plan is actually to work. We are working with a bunch of concession holders. So Govia Thames Rail, which is the Go Ahead group, is where we put we've a whole solar program with them directly with Network Rail. So, following the London up the commuter lines, the whole idea of Energy Garden is that you work with the communities that are there already and that you support them and the rail provider to be like a centralized negotiating body for you, that we operate all of the technical elements. And to make any of these gardens happen, there's probably been about £2,000 to £10,000 worth of cost just to deal with the rail operator to get the garden up and running. And so therefore you need to be able to have that money to be able to help the communities to deliver what they say they want to. And then once that's up and running, organizing the groups and giving them £10 million liability insurance and making sure there's lockups and all the right tools and everything is the quota. So I really see Energy Garden both growing across London, but also across the country, supporting all those different communities to have this conversation around sustainability, around, it's truly our urban commons that we have been separated from. And especially now as glass and concrete and steel covers up most of our cities due to the rise of everyone wanting to own a asset class. Therefore, a lot of the green space is being covered up and no one has gardens anymore. So really talking to the transport providers and to the rail infrastructure and saying, how can we include people in there to have a chance to grow things, but also it's a dialogue with nature. I mean, you can say we've all seen foxes coming on the rail lines, or you might have seen a bee buzzing along the way, but to know that there is huge increases in these urban corridors that collect and connect our urban commons is a whole other way of thinking. And if we can have that dialogue with communities, I believe that this is a substrate, Energy Garden is a substrate that it can grow across the country. And that is exactly what we want to do. And it's exactly what we're inviting everybody to become a member of Energy Garden, to really become a part of that. And I think, as you can see from Charlotte, their support of who we are and our support of who they are, it really enables projects like this to happen. So we can support passenger journeys. So it just, if you're not interested in getting involved on a daily basis, you can just smile at the pretty flowers and see the biodiversity go by. But if you do want to get involved, and you can get involved in the gardens, you can be a part of the youth training program. We have a new one that opens today. We also have schools programs that are around the stations. And then we have the co-op. People can invest and become a member of that. And it's like, why not become a part of the just transition? And you can do it on your way to work while you would have been sitting there for 4 to 10 minutes waiting to, looking at, the feed on your phone going, this is ridiculous. Why is this happening? I can't believe these politicians. What is this? And you can say, well, here's an actual physical thing I can do when I'm on my way to work, when I'm on my way to see friends, when I can know where it comes from, I know what it's doing.
It's clearly something you're incredibly passionate about, but what a fantastic venture, what a great model. And I think the way you've described it, I can just see a network of energy gardens popping up all across the UK, and any urban station or semi-urban station could have one. So huge thank you to you both for being part of the podcast today. It's been really, really exciting, and for painting that picture and helping us smell the mint at the station side, Agamemnon and Charlotte, thank you. Rick, what a great couple of guests. Well done.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Really. It's so energizing. There's so many puns that came out of this conversation, but definitely the two of you are energizing. I would love to see, obviously, selfishly, I go in and out of London reasonably often. I'd like to see more energy gardens in London stations, and I would love to see this spreading to other parts of the UK as well. I don't know whether they just need to come and see some energy gardens in London and physically see it and smell it and take that with them. But why aren't other people in other big cities around the UK following your lead?
Maybe they will now. Now we've got.
Well, that's what we're on a mission.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll put all of the links and things up on the website as well. So if people want to see stations or get in touch with both of you, they can. And definitely, this is a movement that will grow and grow, I'm sure, as people go back to rail, and hopefully we abandon our cars even more. So it's only an onward trajectory for this. So
it's one that we want to promote. Definitely, it's carbon copy. So we definitely get behind this and just keep raising awareness.
Absolutely. So thank you both so much for your time today. It's been really terrific to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
For more information about today's episode, check out carboncopy.eco/copy this. Join in the conversation by following us on Twitter and using the hashtag #CopyThisPod. Until next time,